Esports have a lot of controversy and baggage surrounding them. They're pretty big events viewed by surprisingly quite a lot of people who are interested in the pro scenes of certain games. My brother, for example, watched a lot of the Tekken esports scenes. But the one thing that you might notice in a lot of these esports scenes is that a majority of the players are all men. Actually, no, you won't notice that at all because you're a gamer who cares more about games and the player's skills and what you can learn from them. However, if you're an ideologue, you will definitely notice them. You will see tons and tons of men in this gaming space. That's simply not acceptable for my ideology. We need more women in this space, and we're gonna do whatever it takes to get them there, like attempting to start a sexual harassment story. And it's not like women haven't been pros in the gaming space. For example, I main Xiaoyu in Tekken, and while I don't play competitively or online at all, I do like seeing Tanukana plays. She's pretty damn good, and I do learn a couple of neat tricks from her. Women have the opportunity to play and compete with the guys on the esports, and considering that I'm pretty average on Tekken, I will surely get beat up by the women pros. But to be fair, I think there is an actual discussion that needs to be had when we're talking about the actual women who are in the esports scene. Maybe the space isn't as inviting because there are tons of men in there. That, or maybe they're just not really that interested in esports. I know, a very wild idea. Anyway, quite a few people talk about this in my social media, and I do have a couple of articles and videos talking about esports, so hey, let's talk about women on esports and whether or not we should correct this non-diverse space. Let's start off with this video by Bloomberg's TikTok. No, not that one. This is a very simple short video designed for Twitter or Instagram, essentially talking about how women are underrepresented in the esports world. Oh really, TikTok? No, not that one. Why is that? Is it because the men are being too bothersome to the women, or is it because women just don't have the same desire to become as competitive as the men? But then this video goes instantly with the misinformation. In this case, they're lying by omission. Just 45% of US gamers in 2018 were female, according to the ESA. Now, I've talked about this so many times in my past videos. What the ESA didn't include on the information is that these 45% of women who play games, they don't play the same games that men do. A good portion of these women play casual mobile games on their phones. I've talked about the Quantic Foundry article dissecting all the types of genres that women play the most. Sure, there are women who play the same games as men, but they are certainly not all of the 45%. Seriously, ask yourself this question. Would the average woman participate in a competitive CSGO or Dota 2 or Tekken? Then change the subject to the average women gamers, and then change them to the average women who play CSGO, Dota 2 or Tekken. I mean, I play CSGO and Tekken, and I'm a male. Even I don't have a lot of desire to go competitive because I'm not a competitive guy in gaming and I am horrendous at it. I can't even play tic-tac-toe right.
I got this. Good move.
I play games to relax, which is why I play most of them on the easiest difficulty. If you want to tell me to get good, PayPal me 1K or something. Anyway, the video continues. The gaming executives say that they're pushing for more women on pro rosters thanks to the brand new statistics. How are you going to push them? By removing the men's selection and arbitrarily selecting the women in there instead of actually letting their talent show? Sorry to say this, but there's a good reason why we separate the sports for the men and women. Unfortunately, one gender is proven to be more competitive and more superior in general. They're just not on the same playing field. Then the video says, but the reality is, female gamers are few and far between. Well, when you took a simple statistical number like 45% on face value without understanding the nuance and omitting several different key factors and information, you are absolutely bound to notice the inconsistencies between those numbers and the reality at hand. Maybe you people need to stop being so simple-minded and actually understand the meaning of that 45%. The video then goes on to say that harassment and toxic behavior has grappled the industry for years. Yes, and guess what? It happens to the male players as well. It's not something that is exclusive towards the women. There will be female-specific insults, sure, but the overall treatment is going to be the same. A lot of players are going to use everything from your race, your gender, your identity. They're going to use all of them just to make sure that you get insulted. And if this is one of the reasons why women don't want to get into esports, that's fine. That's not a terrible reason. You don't have to compete at all. No one is forcing you. It is totally understandable why women don't want to compete in that space. Like seriously, please tell me, why do we need more women in esports other than to check on the diversity checkbox? It's not necessary. It's not mandatory. Pushing women in there through something like affirmative action because of your stupid ideology is only going to discredit the talent of a lot of women players in there, and it's gonna put a lot of women in an uncomfortable space. No one is forcing these women to be on the esports scene until you ideologues decided, hey, we need to push more women in here. At this moment, the only one forcing women to compete in a space that they really have no interest to in general are the ideologues. I don't recall gamers saying we need to have more women in this space. If women don't want to be in this space, that's fine. We can still enjoy our video games. We can still compete just fine. There's absolutely no need to have women to be on esports unless if you hate testosterone or competition or men in general, which explains why a lot of these demands come from ideologues. Anyway, the video continues. Some women report feeling marginalized in a space where everyone is anonymous. Then be anonymous? I don't get your issue here. Other women report receiving sexist remarks while playing. Yes, banters and insults happen in every sports tournament ever, and they're gonna use everything, including your identity, as a way to insult you. This isn't news, and this isn't going to change. How are you supposed to change the atmosphere of people competing against each other? There will always be banters and toxicity. Publishers have attempted to address the harassment complaints, but the video gaming space is still not one known for gender equality. And why should the gaming space be gender equal? Why should the gaming space have 50-50 balance of men and women when they are completely different genders and they have different interests, biological impulses, and desires for competition? It seems to me that ideologues are unable to handle this unfortunate reality that women are just not that interested in gaming, especially competitive gaming, and that they're unable to replicate their utopian diverse gaming world because natural biology hampers them. The question that seriously needs to be asked is this: why do we need to push diversity when we don't really need one? Who is asking for more diversity in this space? Why would we need a more diverse gaming space? There's absolutely no need for all of this. I don't see the needs for a more diverse gaming space. I want girls to have their own personal choice, and it just so happened that girls aren't interested in esports. Why would they be? I'm not interested in esports or being competitive, and I'm just a regular male player. There are a lot more articles popping up begging for more women to participate in esports. This one is from GameIndustry.biz. Esports urgent need to visible gender diversity. Oh wow, it's an urgent need? Please tell me why it's an urgent need, writer. Oh wait a second, a bunch of people from the esports scene saying that diversity is needed. But why though? Why is diversity needed? That's the question here. Don't dodge it. The writer then takes one more step by saying, hey, let's also have non-binary individuals in there. Again, why? Please, can we get to the actual explanation? The writer then said, mercifully, no one in the industry level is pretending men are the only people good enough for gaming and interested in competing in it. Okay, maybe not the former, but in general, I am definitely convinced with the latter. Women are just not interested in competing, especially against the men. Do you have any citations that prove otherwise? The article then went on to cite a couple of articles that disprove those previous claims. The first one is an article also from GameIndustry.biz talking about how 84% of teen girls in the UK play video games in their spare time. Again, what kind of video games, writer? Just because they play games doesn't mean that they play the same games that people play on the esports scene. The kids that I know play mobile games like PUBG Mobile. Yes, they play PUBG on mobile. I tried to find the main source for the article, but it's non-existent, so there's that. The second one is talking about the US audiences, and it leads into a PDF file containing a lot of really insightful information on gaming in the US. It's essentially a report that contains a lot of information, like the type of platforms that people play in their games, how much time that they spend in gaming compared to major hobbies, etc. It's a pretty interesting report, but the main topic of discussion here is the esports report. The profile of the US esports fan indicates that there are 75% of them who are men and 25% of them who are women, and yet the claim in the original paragraph suggested that there's a higher rate of interest from women compared to men. I don't know about you, but there's something not quite right here. All of this push for women to be on esports seem to come from misleading data and statistics that don't tell the whole truth. Either that or the data just outright refuted one of the writer's claims, which is a failure in the writer's part. Even if I agree that we need more diversity in gaming, how are we going to make progress to this cause if we have to lie to people, either by omitting key facts or just straight up lie to them? This isn't exactly persuasive, guys. It might be persuasive to the progressives who absorb information information from their tribes like a freaking sponge, but I'm not persuaded. The writer then continues to push the narrative by stating that women still make up half of the gaming industry and even predicted to surpass the number of men. Wow, writer, that's a very desperate utopia that you're trying to grasp. Sorry, but this ain't gonna happen. That prediction sounds like a heap of nonsense. The numbers apparently indicate that audience toxicity may be a major component. Writer, you cannot change how audiences behave. Even if I agree that the audience toxicity is a major problem, which I do in some regards, this is something that is straight up impossible to change. Audiences are always going to be toxic, and punishing them by removing the BattleNET account blizzard, for example, is not gonna change the fact that women are just not that interested in esports. The writer then claims that thanks to women making up only 30% of gamers on YouTube, 22% of esports team members, and 19.5% of gamers on Twitch, that means that women are playing video games, but they're not willing to play for an audience. So, what does that prove? This entire argument relies on the idea that people go to esports to get attention, and while you do get tons of attention on esports, I'm very sure most people get into that space for competition and winning the competition. The article continues talking about how there's a massive gender pay gap for streamers. Really, writer? Are we seriously gonna talk about the gender pay gap of female streamers on Twitch? Apparently, according to Superdata on behalf of PayPal, there are 24% of men who aren't paid and 47% of women who aren't paid. And why does this happen? I don't really know for sure, honestly. The article doesn't really explain too much other than there's a gender pay gap. I guess I'm supposed to just believe that. The article then talks about how audiences are known to tear apart women who gain an iota of visibility. One of the examples is a female Overwatch host who received death threats earlier this year, actually last year, for expressing an opinion on Twitter. Writer, you might want to check that article that you cited because what she said on Twitter is basically thanking men in International Women's Day. Not only that, but she's essentially said, did I offend you for suggesting that men needed equality too? So humor me on this, writer. Who are the types of people that got angry when men are being given any source of credit, especially during a day that is supposed to celebrate women? Isn't that an interesting question? If that's your proof that women in esports got harassed and sent death threats, that only highlights that we need to eradicate these ideologues out of gaming. I mean, they're always the ones that do the harassing, a lot more so, and at times more extreme than what gamers would usually do. I wonder where all these hate towards these ideologues come from when they're the most vile harassers of them all. Now, you might notice that throughout this article, the writer talks about the sorts of struggles that women face in the gaming community, and especially in the esports community. You might also notice that there's not a single mention of the reason why we need diversity. The writer hasn't uttered a single reason and why we need to elevate diversity on esports and why it's urgent. Why do we need to elevate something that only ideologues care about? How about we do things that are more essential for the actual gaming community rather than those that like to send death threats to someone who simply say thank you to men? There is one paragraph dedicated into summarizing the struggle that women face on esports, but that paragraph doesn't tell us anything. Apparently, esports being a boys club has caused no end of headaches for those who just trying to enjoy their hobby or career. Writer, the sorts of people who are just trying to enjoy their hobby or career don't really care about those hobbies or careers being a boys club. The only people who care about that are ideologues that are only interested to force their utopian worldview that is completely devoid of any basis of reality. The writer continues on. Do we see an even split of women and men on the stage of an Overwatch League match? No, writer, that's not gonna happen in 10, 12, or even hundreds of years because women aren't interested in gaming and they're not interested to compete with men in gaming. If this push of diversity is for your idealized utopia to exist, sorry to say this, but it's not going to be possible, especially if your agenda is being pushed by completely misleading information. The writer continues to propose her idealized utopian gaming world like having more women than men on the stage of the international without creating a separate league for them. I don't think that's going to happen, writer. Even actual sports are still separating men and women because they're all in completely different leagues. The writer then talks about non-binary individuals because hey, let's add more people into the diversity checklist. And finally, the writer asks, do we see exactly one woman who has struggled her way to the top in spite of all the odds, only to be flooded with a bunch of people on Twitch saying how horrible she is for suggesting that men deserves equality too? Oh wait, that's not it. I think this is as good as time as any to sum up all the things that we found here. Why aren't there a lot of women who are interested in esports? In general, general, it's just lack of interest. And there are so many things that your average women wouldn't be interested in. They're not interested in esports, they're not interested to compete with the men on esports, and you can even argue that they're not even interested with gaming in general, especially the esports type of games. Can this lack of interest be blamed on the overabundance of men? Sure, but men's interests towards gaming are growing and growing as time went on, so that's not gonna change at all. It's just the natural progression of the gaming community. Can this lack of interest be blamed on the audience's toxicity? Sure, but audiences being toxic happens all the time, regardless if you're small or big in the community, and it's impossible to make them to stop being toxic. Any sorts of attempt on making them to stop being toxic only comes off as authoritarian. It blames the innocents, and they're way too restrictive for anyone to have any sorts of fun. And like I said, the lack of interest on women playing esports games is due to the fact that mobile games are just infinitely more accessible, and that's fine. Women playing on their mobile phones isn't a problem at all. The real problem is ideologues forcing women who play these games to go into a space that they're not comfortable with and they're not interested in. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that women in general are just not that interested in esports. They're more interested to chill and relax, playing their casual mobile games while killing some time. Now, this isn't to say that all women gamers do this, but this is just a general observation. I feel like all of this push for more women in esports and more women in gaming are merely to serve the ideologues' own utopian world that isn't really based on any sorts of reality. These people omit a lot of key information to push their utopian world on everyone. Sorry to say this, but nature and science work against your utopian future. You're never gonna see women be as competitive as men. You're never going to see an equal number of women competing with the men on the esports tournament. That's just not gonna happen at any point in time because the nature simply goes against that worldview. If your idealized utopian world requires you to outright deny facts and reality in general, I think you have bigger issues. And speaking of someone with bigger issues, what's with that Overwatch esports player that is revealed to be a male?